Hi, I'm Rochelle.
And I'm Alicia.
We are the founders of Wild Goose Meditation, and we're excited today to talk a little bit about bringing mindfulness into politics.
Woo-woo.
Yay! So this last political cycle was super challenging and a little rough on both sides, honestly. Yeah. It was difficult for everybody, I think. A lot of discord and anger and fear.
Yeah,
and
I don't think it mattered which side you were on, or even if you picked a side or not. Most people were pretty affected by the environment of the last cycle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, actually. Media, obviously, like, it's ever present. Social media, it's even more ever present.
And personal. It feels really personal.
It feels super personal. Just the way like the algorithms are, we tend to be drawn towards people who think like us. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to have conversations with people who believe like you. But sometimes we can create an echo chamber, especially on social media, where we're just engaging with people who believe the same way we do. That's tricky for having empathy and understanding the people on the opposite side. If you never have an opportunity to hear their rationale or whatever their motives are, then it's really easy to put blanket statements down. We kind of lose our empathy, and don't we start saying like, oh, all those Republicans or all those Democrats, they couldn't vote that way if they were intelligent or good people, or whatever it is, right? Like we
pass a moral judgment on that person based on their beliefs. Or we might not even know their beliefs based on the person that they voted for or the article they just posted. We make huge sweeping judgments about them.
Totally. And we kind of create a filter, I think, that we, Democrats believe this way, Republicans believe this way, or must be a certain way as people. And that can be really tricky if we're not aware of what our filters are that we're kind of pushing people through.
Totally agree. And, last cycle was difficult. And I see this new cycle coming up as an opportunity to kind of go inward and if I want it to be different, to make some changes. And so if I do want to come out of this next cycle, maybe having more space for understanding other people, maybe feeling a little bit less distress and fluctuations on a daily basis.
And combative with people.
If I want to be preserving my relationships with others a little better, then I'm going to need to make some changes, because if I approach the problem the exact same way, I'm going to get the same result. So the environment that we are in is so polarized. And like you were saying, like on social media, so often we are one step removed from people. So it's not like I'm engaging in a conversation with somebody who believes differently than me, and slowly we trust each other until we share our more inner beliefs, and we can hold space for each other. Yeah. Oftentimes, it's a good friend from high school who posts a really inflammatory post that I probably would never have known about them just from a casual conversation, but I get to see into this. And so, like you said, I place all these stereotypes on them. And nobody likes to be reduced to a stereotype. And I think that's why so many of us came out of this last cycle with a little bit of like political PTSD, because we
very
had
traumatizing.
We had people close to us, people with shared history. We had people who we felt should have known better than to have picked whatever side they picked, come to a different conclusion than we came to. And then as we got more and more polarized, it wasn't like we just picked a different side. We were on opposite sides of a war that we were waging. And all of a sudden, they're placing stereotypes on me, which hurts. And so then I sling back stereotypes at them. And nobody wins in that environment.
Yeah. And it can become pretty difficult to see people as people with, with histories, with reasons for what they're doing. And they sort of become not a person, but a symbol of, whatever group they belong to that we may or may not agree with. And when we see people as a symbol, well, it's just really hard to have empathy for a symbol.
And once we turn somebody or a group of people into a symbol of something that we hate, we respond much more to the story in our head about them than to them. And so what we've done is we've dehumanized them. We've reduced them to a symbol or to a stereotype. And so...
Or when people say things that we really don't agree with, we have to justify it in our minds by saying, oh, that's like an animal or like a monster. There are a lot of different ways to dehumanize somebody, but they're all equally harmful.
And when that happens, we assume that we could never understand them. We feel like we're a different species from them. And so we've separated ourselves. And so what we want to do is we want to rehumanize. We want to close that space between where we are and where they are. And people keep saying these are such divided times. And yet, as soon as you start talking about things like this, as soon as you start talking about closing the gap, seeing people as people listen. Their ears perk up because we're all yearning for this. We're yearning for more connection. We just need to get there. And so one of the exercises that Rochelle and I wanted to talk about first is affirmations. So one thing you can do when you are engaging with a person or a forum online or a comment section online, and you can feel yourself moving away from that baseline, from that center of groundedness. Something that can help you not respond to them with such dehumanizing stereotypes is to bring your inner self back to baseline and calm down. And so an affirmation is a small group of words or a phrase that is sort of like a little key phrase that pulls you back to center, that reminds you of your intentions.
And it's a positive statement.
Yes, it's usually, it's a positive statement. So, and we like to practice these when we're feeling in a neutral setting. So we don't want to whip this out when we're in the middle of like a blind rage and we've never even practiced this before.
Create some familiarity with
Yes, because the more that you do this in a neutral setting, the more conditioned you will be to come back to that baseline when you need it. And we also think that pairing an affirmation with your breath makes it even doubly more powerful. Some affirmations that we find to be very helpful with bringing you back to center when you're engaging with somebody from a different political party than your own or with different political views than your own are breathing in, I see my humanity. Breathing out, I see your humanity. And you can practice this any way you want. You can set a timer for 1 minute and sit down in a corner in your room when you wake up in the morning and just breathe in and think these words as you breathe in and breathe out. You can say them out loud if you want. You can do it for 10 minutes. You can do it for 1 minute. You could put them up in your mirror and just use them when you're brushing your teeth in the morning or at night. And as you practice these affirmations, they will absorb into your psyche and be able to be called upon as tools in the moment, that even just one round of breathing in and out while you're thinking this affirmation can have a really powerful effect at bringing you back to center. 2 other affirmations that we think are really helpful are breathing in, I offer myself compassion. Breathing out, I offer compassion to others or to you. And you can have a person in mind maybe even if you need. The last one is breathing in, I see my needs. And breathing out, I let go of what I cannot control. And we'll talk a lot more about why it's important to see your own needs in these sorts of situations, because it creates space for you as well as the other party, the other people. So these affirmations are really powerful for helping you remember those intentions, because we all start with the best intentions, right? We all want this connection. We want to understand and be understood. And once our fight or flight kicks in, it's just really hard to remember those things.
It is. It all goes out the window so easily if you haven't practiced. So one example that we've talked about before of kind of using symbols or seeing people as symbols rather than people is in cases of road rage. I mean, when we're hurtling down the freeway, at 70 miles an hour or whatever, we're pretty vulnerable. Like we're kind of mindful of the danger of the situation, and it kind of, whether or not we're aware of stress, it does kind of ratchet things up a notch. And we see the people around us not as like people driving a car, but we see them as cars. And
so we're highly aware of our own vulnerability, but we're like completely unaware of other people's vulnerability.
Totally. And it's so easy to, insult or be angry at a car because a car has no feelings. And we forget sometimes that there's a real person with a history, and, whatever happened to them before they got on the road, or whatever dumb thing they did to set us off, they're still a person. So we definitely do this, in highly charged conversations, especially with politics. And we sometimes do see the people as just the symbol of like their party or other organization.
Or even a symbol of something we just intensely dislike. Like, like maybe we say, they're so dumb. How could they have done that? Because we're not even looking at them as a party anymore. They're just a symbol of something we despise.
Yeah. And kind of like we were talking about before, how hard is it to have empathy for something that doesn't have feelings in our minds, something that's not alive. So yeah, this humanizing is a really important concept to practice, to be aware of when we put people behind their symbols. So we talked a little bit earlier about using breath to help ourselves stay in kind of that state of calm or being grounded, so that we don't get in our fight or flight, in our highly vulnerable state, and start throwing out things that we don't really want to say to people. So when we're having those stressful moments, we use our breath to bring us back. Since breath is something that we can control, we can ground ourselves when we lengthen our exhale. And that's kind of a really important technique for breath work. When we have a longer exhale than our inhale, it sends a message to our brains, to our bodies, that we're in a safe place. We're okay. We can kind of chill out, and
you're telling your body, like, you can calm down. We're not fighting a lion here. I actually need my brain to think through this situation.
Yeah. So one of our favorite ways to kind of put this principle into action is using the 7-11 breath. And it's really simple. You inhale to a count of 7 and you exhale to a count of 11. And you can count it at whatever rate you want. It doesn't have to, go on super long. But the point is that you are breathing out for longer than you're breathing in, and kind of reducing your fight or flight state, and staying grounded and calm while you have these difficult conversations.
And one of the great things about 7-11 breathing is you can do it anytime, anywhere. So I actually just took the opportunity to do it while you were talking, because it feels really good and it's really simple. There's not a lot to remember. It's just, oh, thank heaven for my 7-11 breathing.
And it's subtle. Nobody's going to know that you're doing it. So.
And it's always acceptable to breathe. So.
It always is.
As we talked about earlier, when you dehumanize someone, you create a lot of distance between you and them. You are not feeling empathy for them. In fact, you're probably mostly just feeling threatened or anger or any of these emotions that are defensive. And when that happens, it's often you feel like they're so different from me, because they, especially even if it's someone that you know closely, you have a shared history, you feel like, how could you have come to this conclusion if you were a good person? And you basically essentially just severed any ability to understand them, because you feel that what lies in them does not lie in you. And we like to talk about this in terms of seeds of humanity. So as humans, we share most of the same seeds internally, the same capabilities and abilities. And sure, maybe I like to think that I water or tend to certain seeds more than other seeds, and somebody else's garden might look different than mine. But if I look inward and I'm completely honest with myself, when I am looking at somebody else and saying, oh, they abuse power so much, there's such a power greedy person. If I look inward and honestly ask myself, does the seed of the ability to abuse power lie in me? Whether or not I water it, is the answer yes? Yeah, probably. I mean, I as a parent, do I ever abuse my power or wield my power over my children's head? I've probably done that before. And if that's the case, that means I am capable, even if I hope I never do, but that I am capable of doing something like they are doing, whether, maybe I'll choose not to do it, but I am capable of it. And in that moment of recognition, I've just made it so that I can understand them from on a much better level.
And we sort of recognize that, there's fertile soil for different characteristics. And maybe if the soil had been fertile in myself for abusing power, then maybe it would have grown more easily.
That's right. Like the environment that
Exactly.
somebody's in. Yes, absolutely. That can change. And what you've just done in that moment is create understanding. And when you create understanding, you just shorten that space between them being this symbol of something you hate, something you could never understand, to something that you can maybe dialogue with.
Yeah. And we're not like making excuses for bad behavior or misuse of power or anything like that, but we're just understanding like how somebody could have got to that point in a very human way. And that, if the situation had been different for us, then maybe we would have done the same thing.
Well, and we're going to talk about this more in a minute, about mirrors and reflections and the way that we see the world. But a lot of times it's really hard for us to go inward and look for those things in ourselves because we are so put off by what we see in that other person. We want to distance ourselves because we don't want to believe that exists in us. So this requires mindfulness and the ability to stay curious. So our second exercise that we want to talk about is mindfulness. And mindfulness is a muscle that is best practiced, again, just like affirmations, in a neutral setting first. It is...
Get comfortable with it before you pull it out in like a really stressful situation.
Yes, and you're not going to be able to do heavy lifting before you've practiced with the small things first. And so when you practice mindfulness in a neutral setting, it becomes a muscle that you gradually are able to strengthen over time. And eventually what we want to be able to do is, even in times of distress, be able to stay present and see reality for what it is. So mindfulness is essentially like a bird, and there are two wings that make it take flight. The first one is awareness, and the second one is acceptance. And we always have, almost always, a story going on in our mind about reality that we are actually responding to, more so than reality. And what mindfulness asks of us is to take that story and that lens that we're viewing the world through, the story we were reacting to in our head, and place that down and accept reality for what it is. So it doesn't mean that we are accepting reality as in, this is what we want, or this is what we think is right.
Or that we're being complacent, like, oh, this is the way it is, so there's nothing I could... We're not giving up.
Right. Yeah. We're not just saying apathy. It's not awareness and apathy. It's awareness and acceptance, which means we are simply seeing reality for what it is and then responding to reality instead of the story in our head. And the way that you can practice this is set a timer for 1 minute to start. You can go all the way up to 1 hour if you want, but 1 to 10 minutes is a great place that a lot of people feel comfortable with. And simply be. You're going to breathe in, breathe out. You're not going to change your breath as thoughts bubble up, as even thoughts of, oh, this is so boring, bubble up. You just are aware of them and you accept them. And it's surprisingly difficult. Yeah. But eventually, as you get more practiced at this, you can maintain that same curiosity, that same non-judgmental attitude of awareness and acceptance as you are dialoguing with someone, or as when you see an inflammatory social media post or whatever, you're able to maintain that sense of curiosity.
Now, with all of these techniques, they're best practiced regularly on your own, and it becomes much easier to pull them out of your toolkit when you need them.